Hi, welcome to the exploreClarion.com, D9Sports.com District 9 playoff preview show for football. I'm Chris Rossetti from D9Sports.com. On my left here is Andy Close from D9Sports.com in the Bradford area. On my right is Rich Rhodes from the Jeffersonian Democrat in Brookville and D9Sports.com. Guys, we've got a pretty good playoff field going on here and an opportunity to do this great show thanks to exploreClarion.com, a nice partnership we've got going on with them. Let's give people an idea of the type of format we're going to do. We're going to look at each set of teams by classification. We're going to start at Quad A, we're going to go to Class AAA, we're going to go to Class AA, Class A. We'll preview each team for you, and then we'll also look at the brackets as a whole. So let's start, Andy, with Class Quad A.
Well, you got Du Bois Beaver team that comes in with a record of 8-1, actually suffered their first and only loss last week to Slippery Rock. A team that's really in a program under Frank Verichetti that's kind of been reborn the last couple of years. And they'll get a bye, actually, before facing the State College Central winner next week.
Yeah, I was just going to say the State College matchup is something that they're coming off last year. They lost to, Du Bois lost to State College 28-17. I think talking a little bit to the coaching, a little bit of the coaches going into the postseason, they were feeling that they might have closed the gap with State College a little bit. But I think they were also looking forward to playing a semifinal playoff game. They didn't get that. They've already had a bye week this year. They probably didn't want this off week waiting for the winner of State College in Central Mountain. And they're looking for their first state playoff win since 1996. So I'm thinking that's a big hurdle for them to get over. They might be good enough to do it.
When you guys look at Du Bois, the thing that sticks out to me is their offense, and very balanced with Gabe French, the sophomore quarterback, and Garrett Brown, the senior running back. Garrett Brown, leading rusher in District 9. Rich, what do you take out of what they like to do offensively?
Well, at Brockway, that's where Coach Verichetti was. It was what a lot of people forget, that he did have some good running games in his years. It was a wide open spread offense. But with Garrett Brown, he's unbelievable. He could dominate a game. They haven't had the pass to win games. They can run if they want to. Have they been tested to where they have to use both? Well, they're probably going to be tested against State College, assuming they beat Central Mountain, which is the presumption here. I think they have the weapons to be able to be in that game.
And when you look at Gabe French, also sophomore quarterback, a kid that's really come into his own as the season has progressed. He's got 3 really good targets to throw to. You look at Bryson Polinelli, obviously Garrett Miles, and Jared Balmer. I don't think they've had to pass as much as some of Frank's teams in the past have, but I think if they are forced to against the State College team, I think Gabe's a kid that has shown a lot of moxie and has gotten a lot better as the season's gone along.
The thing that I wonder about with them is, they were riding high, and then all of a sudden that offense, which was averaging over 40, almost 50 points a game, gets held to 15 against the Slippery Rock team. And I don't know, guys, how you feel, but I think that can really do a lot to your psyche. And now you've got a whole extra week to sit and mull about the fact that you didn't score very many points in that game and lost that game. How do you think that affects them?
I really don't think obviously it's going to have some effect on them. They've been used to rolling teams. So I think Mifflin County and Warren are the only teams that they didn't have to pull starters in the second half. I think a loss actually might give them an extra sense of motivation, extra sense of maybe we're not quite as good as we thought we were, and we really have to take a week off like they have, go back to the drawing board and see what's going to work.
Well, and that, Chris, is why they didn't want to. They didn't want a bye week. They wanted to get back out there and play. Some teams with injuries might take that off week. That's not the case with Du Bois. They wanted to be playing this week.
When you look at that 3-team field, obviously we've talked a lot about State College and Du Bois. Any chance Central Mountain pulls the upset?
I don't see it. They played earlier this season. I think it was 36-7. Okay. It would take, I think, a lot for Central to pull off that upset. I just don't see a good State College team losing that game.
Yeah, Du Bois has to prove they can beat State College.
And when you look at State College, you're always looking at a State College team that plays a really tough schedule every year, so you can kind of throw out the records. I think they're 7-3 right now, but you can throw out that record because they're playing some of the best Quad A teams from across the central part of the state every year, and then sometimes even outside of the state. You think about the number of Division I players that have gone on to play, not only at the Division I level, but then on to the NFL from State College High School too. It's a whole different ballgame than, say, even at Du Bois.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's going to be Quad A is going to be an interesting matchup there. Moving on to AAA, guys, interesting scenario because we've already had the District 9 title game as Clearfield had no trouble 49-0 over Bradford last week. But it really wasn't a title game that meant a whole lot because the teams were going to have to qualify for a regional playoff because there's only 3 of them and you have to have at least 4 teams to qualify for the state, to have a team qualify for the state playoffs. So in order to have state playoff teams, you have a regional playoff that includes districts 5, 6, 8, and 9. It's all everywhere from the Pittsburgh City League to down around Somerset to the Altoona area. That's a pretty big region. 4 teams qualified. The 4 teams are in order of seeding. You've got Clearfield number 1. You've got University Prep out of the Pittsburgh City League. They were the City League runners-up. They're number 2. You've got Somerset number 3, and you've got Punxsutawney out of District 9 number 4. And what that sets up for us is a matchup between 2 District 9 teams, Clearfield and Punxsutawney, who used to be in the D9 league together, but haven't played league games for a couple of years now. Clearfield, obviously, unbeaten. Christian Lezer is a 1,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher. They're a really good football team. Punxsutawney, they're a 500 football team, 5-5. They've beaten a bunch of Class A teams. They've struggled against some of the bigger teams. I don't see this being a real big matchup for Clearfield.
Yeah.
I think, you're going to see a lot, Clearfield obviously 49-0 over Bradford last week. I don't think Punxsutawney is a superior team to Bradford. I would be surprised if they could stay in this football game. You touched on Christian Lezer. You got Trey Jordan at receiver, Tyler Stratton, another 1,000-yard rusher in the back. I mean, this team is loaded for bear, and it's going to be very tough for Punxsutawney to stay in that football game.
I feel it's ironic that Clearfield gets a chance to play Punxsy because there was, the I don't know if controversy, but a debate on how you determine the seedings in the District 9 championship game. Well, Bradford got their title shot. They didn't even get to the playoffs. You want to get technical. Now Punxsy gets a chance now to play Clearfield, and I really think it's going to be a very similar score. Clearfield has playmakers. I think the scary thing is that Christian Lezer is a junior. Tyler Stratton is a junior. Trey Jordan is a senior, the top receiver. But you have some underclassmen that are going to be here next year as well. And the Bisons are going to be good. Now, I don't know, are they losing a lot outside of that after this year? Well, first things first, this is a good team. And I would be very surprised if they didn't roll over the Chucks in this game.
And I look at that bracket, and I think that University Prep is probably the biggest obstacle between Clearfield and making the state playoffs technically. I mean, you could argue that being in the regional playoffs is like being in the state playoffs.
Sure. But
in a technical sense, University Prep is, like I said, the City League runner-up. They lost in overtime to Perry last week in the city title game, 9-6. They also lost earlier in the year, 12-6 to Perry in a game where Perry had to make 4 stops with inside the 5-yard line to stop them. You don't know. It's hard to sometimes tell what happens with City League teams. Sometimes the City League is really good. Sometimes it's not. They only really play within themselves, so you don't get a good feel of where they are as a football team.
And even if you look at the state history between District 9 teams, which is mostly Clearfield, but Bradford occasionally, it's either been a lopsided loss for District 9 or a close win for them. So it could go either way. I would assume that's a good football team.
And, you're talking about Tim Ginocco, too. He has a lot of experience coaching against these District 8, these Pittsburgh City League teams. I think you look at University of Prep, they're a good football team, they're athletic, but they're nothing like some of these teams that Clearfield's seen in the past. I think if that ends up being the matchup, I think that's a game that's very winnable for Clearfield.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's definitely one of those games you go and it's a toss-up, but I don't think it's like playing the great Perry traditional academy teams that were rolling Clearfield and Bradford in basically what amounted to PlayStation-type games
Exactly.
that we've seen in the past. So I think that's a very interesting matchup in that regional. Moving on to AA, another 4-team tournament. In AA, the top seed is Karn City. They're 7-3 coming out of the KSAC Large School Division. They were the KSAC Large School Division champions. You have Kane, the 2nd seed. They kind of snuck into that 2nd seed. I don't think for a lot of the year anybody thought they were going to be the 2nd seed, but they kind of snuck into that 2nd seed, mainly because 3rd seeded Brookville has had a little bit of trouble down the stretch. And so the Raiders fell into 3, and then St. Mary's knew they needed to beat Bellefonte last week to get into the playoffs to begin with. They did that, so they will be the 4th seed. Interestingly enough, for the first time in a few years, semifinal games will be at home sites this year. The last few years, those have been neutral site games, but a couple of factors played into why they're going to be at home sites this year, including the fact that Clarion University, which is usually a place for those games, isn't available all day Saturday because the university team is playing Westchester at 1 o'clock. So they would have only been able to play one game there, then had to take another game someplace else. And I know District 9 was a little bit concerned in losing some money on a situation like that because they have to spend money to rent facilities, whether it's at the university or another high school. So you now take those sites to home sites on Friday night. You've got Kane hosting Brookville in the 3-2 game. You've got St. Mary's hosting Karn City in that 4-1 game. We'll start with the 4-1 game, and that's is a rematch of a game won by Karn City earlier in the year. In fact, week 1 it was. Was it 36-26 if memory serves?
35-26.
It was somewhere in that neighborhood. It was Karn City ran all over them. They ran for 300 some odd yards in that game. They didn't have any one major runner, but that is Karn City's stout, not having one major runner. St. Mary's was without Cody Baker in that game. Cody Baker is their third leading rusher with over 500 yards, and he also plays a key role on defense for the Dutch. So do either of you guys see that game going any differently than it did first week?
I think it has a chance to. Obviously, Cody Baker being back for St. Mary's is a huge addition. Alex Feldbauer, District 9's second leading rusher, more than picked up the slack. But I think the three-headed monster in the backfield there, you look at Baker, Feldbauer, and then Joe Lucchini also. The question for them is, can they slow down Karn City? I mean, I thought, this was a team we all thought when they lost Glenn Toy before the season started, that, okay, what are they going to have rushing the football? And it's just typical Ed Conto coach team, next man up, and they've, that the stats, reflect that.
Yeah, and I agree. I would be surprised if St. Mary's went down there and won the game. If they can get the running game going, who knows? Alex Feldbauer is a very interesting runner. I got a chance to see him once, and for a guy carrying the ball 24 times a game, he's not that big, but you can't argue how tough he is because he's gotten the ball from Coach Joe Slim many times. He's not the only guy that Karn City has to watch to stop, but how many Karn City teams don't get better as the season goes along? And that's what really I stopped my decision at.
Yeah, that makes that easy. And the other thing that makes it easy for me is that St. Mary's can't pass the ball and Karn City can't. Karn City doesn't throw a ball a ton, but they at least give you that option where you know that you have to respect that. With St. Mary's, you don't have to respect the pass at all.
And we should mention Tyler Keppel. I mean, if we're going to mention anybody first out of the Karn City line, Wyatt Edwards is their leading running back, leading rusher, but not far behind is quarterback Tyler Keppel. Good runner, good playmaker as a quarterback. I saw him kick a 68-yard punt. So, I mean, he's a multi-talented player for the Karn City team.
Yeah, and another kid from Karn City I think needs to be mentioned is Zach Moore, because you talk about multi-talented. He's one of their top rushers, and he also is their kicker. And if that game would come down to a situation where they need to kick a field goal or something to win, they've kicked field goals this year. St. Mary's has not. And so I would definitely say the advantage there would be in the Karn City. Moving on to our other game, the 3-2 matchup between Brookville and Kane. Interesting game. Kane playing its first home playoff game since 2008. They've been moving between Double-A and Single-A the last few years. Last year they were Single-A. This year they're back up to Double-A. They play in the AML South. They have a nice win over Elk County Catholic this year. Nice quarterback in Sean Jordan, Andy.
Mm-hmm. Not only Sean Jordan, this is a very senior-laden team. You have a quarterback in Sean Jordan who's completing over 50% of his passes. I believe he's the fourth leading passer in District 9. Got a couple nice targets out there in Jeff Kajancic, Sean Rolick. And then he's got a 1,000-yard runner in the backfield too in Jonah Smith. So this is a team that is very balanced. I think, a team that you have to prepare equally for in the run and in the pass. And a team also that's playing some good football. They've won their last 4 games coming into the playoffs. I don't know, Rich, what are you thinking?
And conversely, Brookville has struggled. There's no question about it. They struggled in a win, even in winning in Seattle. Now, I will say, they lost to Du Bois and they lost to Karn City, who's a top seed. Teams that are very good that, probably not very many teams in District 9 were going to beat anyway. But they've had trouble with turnovers, trouble with stopping the passing game, which raises a red flag with Kane. But Brookville, you look at their past history, and sometimes they come out of nowhere and win. And it wouldn't surprise me if they go up to Kane and win under Red. These two teams play different schedules. Very difficult to kind of assess that and figure out how these teams match up. Brookville's best players are the running backs. Zach Froman went over 1,000 yards last week. He's capable of ripping off a big one. We saw a 98-yard run last week. Brody Zockel's almost to 1,000 yards. And Cameron Yard, the quarterback, who is probably been more effective as a running back. He leads a team in touchdowns. So if they can get their running game going and take the pressure off, maybe making that big pass. Of course, everybody says if you stay away from the turnovers, you're going to win. But with Brookville, they've made 25 this year. So if they do cut that down, that could bode well for the Raiders. That could be an interesting game. I guess that's why I'm going.
As I handicap the Double-A field here, I think we might have a little bit different of an opinion between the three of us on how we see it going. I see Karn City being the team to beat. I don't see Karn City getting a whole lot of resistance. I know, Andy, you feel that Kane has an opportunity of winning this.
I think you look at Kane, as I touched on before, a very senior-laden team, a team that's coming in playing good football, a team that can beat you with the run or with the pass. And I still think, Chris, you mentioned Karn City. I think they're the favorite, though a very slight one. This is a Kane football team that can, they've been playing some really good football. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them, if that ends up being the matchup, Kane-Karn City, for them to pull off that upset.
Well, I would go with Karn City just on their tradition of being a strong team in the playoffs. That would be my pick. And I picked Kane to beat Brookville this week, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Raiders and Gremlins play for the title.
And I think the team that we shouldn't look past is I think St. Mary's is capable of winning this title too. I think any one of the four teams is capable of winning a title. I think as I handicap it, I think Karn City is the top one. But I don't think that anybody would be surprised if St. Mary's came and won it.
And you talk about St. Mary's, too. You mentioned the running game. That running game starts with that offensive line. They're big, they're physical. Chris, I know you were impressed with them when they played Clarion, probably gave Clarion one of their stiffest tests all season. So you're talking about a team that's not a pushover by any means. And Joe Schlim has experience in coaching these kind of games. So, can St. Mary's beat Karn City and get to that championship game? It's possible.
I think it would be big for St. Mary's to win down at Karn City. That'd be a great win for them, probably one of their best wins ever if they would do that.
They've got one playoff win in their history, so any playoff win right now would be a pretty big win for the Dutch. Moving on to A, we have an interesting situation. It's supposed to be an 8-team tournament. It's a 7-team tournament because Coudersport qualified at 3-6 as the AC, decided not to go. AC Valley was offered that spot at 3-6, decided not to go. I know that my feeling is in a closed playoff system, if you qualify, you should go because otherwise it creates an unbalanced situation like this 7-team tournament. You guys feel differently?
No, I agree with you, but given the circumstances we're in, those schools have the choice to decline. And I think in a year with no dominant team in Class A, they might decide to go play. But as you guys know, there's 2 dominant teams in Class A this year in Port Allegany and Clarion. And I think Cowdy and AC Valley looked at those situations and said, hey, you know what? Realistically, can we go up to Port Allegany and play a competitive football game? I think, they determined that the answer was probably not.
Should be noted that the bracket is basically pre-seeded before the season, so records really don't mean a whole lot in the seeding. The AML champion this year got to be the number 1 seed. The KSAC Small School Division champion, the number 2 seed. The AML's runner-up is the number 3. The KSAC Small School is number 4, and so forth down into the wild card where they actually use PowerPoints to determine your wild cards. Smethport, the lone wild card this year. So basically the seeding goes like this. Port Allegany's number 1 at 10-0. Clarion's number 2 at 10-0. Brockway is 8-2 at number 3. Union at 9-1 slides into that number 4 because of the pre-seeding. Right. Then you get Kerwinsville at Elk County Catholic at 7-2 is number 5. Kerwinsville 7-2 is number 6 based on the fact that Elk beat Kerwinsville. And then you get Smethport at 4-5 in that 7 spot. So first round games this Friday night, you have Smethport visiting Clarion. You've got Kerwinsville visiting Brockway, and you have Elk County Catholic visiting Union. Let's start with that. Let's start with the 7-2 matchup and take a look at that first. You've got Smethport Clarion. These are 2 teams that have a lot of playoff history with each other. Played 4 times between 1995 and 1999 in the playoffs, but haven't played a game since then. They've each won a couple of games against each other in the playoffs. Obviously, the Bobcats 10-0, first time in school history 10-0 in the regular season, 3rd time ever that they're 10-0. The last time, 2000, they were 10-0. They lost to Kerwinsville in the district title game. In 1999, they were 10-0 and lost to Cameron County. I think they've got a pretty good shot at being 11-0 for the first time.
I would think so. I mean, I guess they're the team that's glad that they have they're not the number 1 seed this year. With Port Allegany getting the number 1 seed this year, it's the KSAC's turn to be number 2. They'll take that game and get something off that. Any momentum will help. But they're heavily favored. I think there's no other way of saying it.
Yeah, and the thing about Clarion, both on the offensive side and the defensive side of the football, a very balanced football team. I look at them, I've gotten a chance to watch them 10 times this year, and I couldn't tell you who their best player is on either side of the ball. TJ Armstrong is the most talented player, but he's by far not the only one that they've got. He rushes for 700 yards. He's made a team high 79 tackles. Maybe most impressively on defense, the 20.5 tackles for a loss. He just disrupts things on that side of the football. But you get a kid like Cameron Kirkland who has almost 600 yards rushing, over 400 yards receiving. It returns punts for them, scores in a variety of ways. He's scored on the ground. He's scored throwing a touchdown pass. He's caught 4 of them. He's returned punts for touchdowns. He's got an interception return for a touchdown. This kid pretty much does it all for them.
You didn't even mention Damian Slyke, another very talented kid on both offensively and defensively. And I think Rich touched on it. This is a Clarion team that's a very heavy favorite going into this first round game with Smethport. If Smethport is going to have any chance, it centers around Clay Schuler, their multi-talented quarterback and defensive back. You talk about a kid who's rushed for over 1,000 yards, threw for over 500. For a Smethport team that, has seen some hard times in recent years, but Chris is right, Rich is right. This is a Clarion team that I think in the end has just too many weapons, too many kids that can beat you for Smethport.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even mentioned John Cadis is about to set the school record for passing yards in a season. He's 17 yards away from that.
1968.
Yeah, it's a 1968. Drew Zwald had that record. It's amazing that a passing record has lasted at any school since 1968.
I'd put that one up against any other team in District 9.
You got Cody Hurst as well, who set the single season receiving record at Clarion.
They once again, lots of weapons. A couple of kids that Clarion also, in addition to Schuler, and Schuler's obviously the key there for Smethport, but Carl Leitner has had a nice season running the football for them as well.
You look at Carl Leitner. Carl Leitner is not a big kid. He's a tough kid, all-state wrestler, over 500 yards rushing. He's a kid that, along with Schuler, can give you that second dimension if you're Smethport. And once again, talk about Schuler having to have a big game if they have any chance in this one. I think Carl Leitner is a kid that's got to step up and play a big role as well.
And I think another kid Clarion's got to know where he's at on the football field is Ryan Corbett, because he's got 8 catches for over 200 yards this year. So he doesn't catch the ball a lot, but when he does, they're big plays.
Sure. And those have come in big moments during the season too. You look at a game against Otto Elder this year when Schuler and Corbett hooked up 3 times. I think, if I recall correctly, I think all 3 touchdowns were over 50 yards or close to it. So a kid that obviously doesn't get his hands on the ball a lot, but when he does, look out, because it's probably going to be a big play.
Looking at the other game involving Clarion County teams, you've got Union hosting its first ever playoff game, or at least District 9 playoff game at Vaduna Stadium in Reimersburg at 7 o'clock when they entertain Elk County Catholic. That's an interesting matchup. Both of those teams are really good football teams. I think that game could go either way.
We talked a lot about Clarion for good reason. That game shouldn't be much of a contest. We really, without sugarcoating it. These other 2 first-round games had a little more interest, starting with this Union game against Elk County. Throw it up. Maybe the home field will make a difference in this one. Both teams have playmakers. You're talking Brody Schick has been on the map all season for the Golden Knights, and Elk County. Really, there's no superstar there. I might be wrong, but there's some players. But it's just a really intriguing matchup for these two that round.
The first team to score wins.
No, that's a good way of putting it.
I don't think it's quite that low scoring, but you're talking about 2 teams that are very good defensively. You touched on Brody Schick on the offensive side of the ball. There's a kid that has 10 interceptions defensively.
That's crazy.
Elk County Catholic, kid and Joe McLaughlin, 100 tackles. Clayton Hausler, 5 interceptions. These 2 teams bring it on the defensive side of the football, and points are definitely going to be at a premium.
When you look at the games that Elk County Catholic has won, and a big win over Kerwinsville for them, it was a 13-12 game. They were able to shut down a pretty powerful Kerwinsville offense. Union outside of the Clarion game, and they even held Clarion to 28 points. Clarion's averaging 43.3 points a game. They only scored 28 against Union. Union's pretty much doing it with defense. You look at their scores every week, they put up maybe 20 points a game, but it's nothing like some of these other teams that we're talking about that are all about offense. Union's doing it defensively, and Tyler Weiser's a kid defensively that has really gotten it done as a sophomore for them, over 80 tackles on the year as a sophomore. Both teams are similar offensively in the fact they can throw the ball a little bit, but they would rather run the football. Union has been hurt by some injuries the last few weeks. Guys like Keenan Rankin, Caden McGregor have been out. According to head coach Dave Lauder, those guys look like they're going to be good to go this week, which could tip the balance maybe back into Union's favor a little bit.
Sure, and they're going to need both those kids, in order to win this game. This really is a coin flip. You got Union with the home field advantage, but you got an Elk team that maybe is still. I mean, a lot of those seniors on this year's team remember that game against Clarion last year in the playoffs, the 20-0 lead. Chris, you were there fourth quarter, and they can't hang on. So I think this is an Elk County team that's going to be highly motivated to get that playoff win that eluded them.
And I give credit to Travis Streetpack, the coach for Elk County. Very, very defensive-oriented team, and well, that gets the job done usually in the playoffs. They've been in some really tough situations the last few years.
Well, you talk about last year losing the 20-0 lead in the fourth quarter and a 22-20 loss to Clarion. 2 years ago, they lose a 4 overtime game to Port Allegheny in the first round. And coming to Clarion County is nothing new for Elk County Catholic. This is amazing. This is the 7th or 8th trip that the Crusaders have made to Clarion County in the first round of the playoffs in Class A. It hasn't gone very well for them. They won the first one back in '95 over Clarion Limestone. Haven't won since then. Lost a couple times to once or twice to CL. Lost a couple times to Clarion. Have lost to Red Bank in there. So they're hoping maybe the change of venue to Reimersburg changes some things around for them.
I just like the AML KSAC matchup here. It's a close game between conferences that like to try to get those bragging rights every year, and this is a good matchup to see how that goes maybe.
In the third game we've got this Friday, you've got at Verchetti Field in Brockway, you have Brockway hosting Kerwinsville. And this is a rematch of a game that was played back in early October that was a wild game, guys. It was 35-0 at one point in the first half, Brockway. It was 35-28 then, before Brockway ended up pulling away for, 54-36 or something like that was the final score. But what a wild type of game. You don't see that very often in District 9 or really anywhere in high school football.
This might be the game that I would go to if I had no duties anywhere else. I really think that would be the game I'd go to. Entertaining teams we've seen Brockway all year put up points, win or lose. Kerwinsville is a hard-nosed team with Andy Ivanka with the running game, but they've been able to throw the ball this year. So I think that could be a very entertaining game. Does Kerwinsville pick it up to where, when they started getting back in the game, or was that a mirage that Brockway is going to turn it around and dominate the whole game rather than just a half? Good questions.
I think another question surrounding Brockway is where are they at? You talk about a team that suffered back-to-back, big-time losses to Port Allegheny. Obviously, no shame in that, but getting banged up in the process. Where are they at mentally? Where are they at physically? Obviously, looking at a team that could, has beaten Kerwinsville once and could certainly do so again. But I think those are the big question marks surrounding that team right now.
No question. The thing that's so intriguing about Brockway, 2 years ago when Frank Verchetti was the head coach, they were throw it around, running, shoot. It's now called the spread, but the spread's basically the basis of the run and shoot of the 1980s. Right. Then last year they get a new head coach and they go back into a running situation where they're running the ball a lot like they used to do. This year, a third coach in 3 years, but now they're back to that high-flying offense. Can't not talk about Brockway without talking about junior quarterback Alex Schaefer-Doan.
No, Alex Schaefer-Doan was a kid, first-year starter at quarterback, really impressive. He got a couple of nice targets too. You look at Jake Perrin, you look at Anthony Benson. But up until the games against Port Allegheny, this is a kid that you were talking about, still the second leading passer in District 9, still a kid that can make a lot of big plays for you. He's got a big-time arm. And, you look at, a kid like Chad DeLillo, too, back there,
1,000-yard rusher.
Yeah, and, we talk about the Brockway teams, the Baganza and Vervort Brockway teams. I think this team, while not as talented, has more of a balance to it.
Well, I was going to say Alex Schaefer-Doan is from DuBois Central Catholic, transferred to DuBois Central Catholic from DuBois. He was at DuBois last year. He is now playing.
Didn't play football at DuBois last year.
He did not play football at DuBois last year. So here he is going to, over 2,000 yards passing perhaps with another good game. And so he'll be playing basketball he won't be playing basketball. He transferred to DuBois Central, ruled ineligible to play basketball. So he must have some talent in that sport, but he can't do that this year. But because he's with the DuBois Central school, a student there, they have a co-op with Brockway. That's why he's playing quarterback at Brockway, and he's not doing a bad job at all.
No, not at all. And then you look at Kerwinsville, and I think, we all look at Kerwinsville and they're running. Zach Tibbins, Josh Kreslik. Tibbins over 1,000 yards, Kreslik close to it. Right. But what really sticks out to me is the way they can throw the football. Hunter McCracken has had a quietly solid season for them. I think he completes almost 60% of his passes. Now, he's a little prone to the turnover. He's got 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But that's something that you never think about Andy and Vanco teams is their ability to throw the ball. But every year they seem to be able to throw that ball just enough to keep other teams honest.
Well, I think Russell's the receiver, right?
Yeah, Jordan Russell.
He's got about all his catches, so it's no secret where they're going to throw. If teams can't find that or take care of that, then the Tide are going to hurt you. And if they have if they have him open and running their two running backs, they're going to score some points as well. Kerwinsville has shown that they can do that. I'm just looking forward to see how this game goes. It'll be very interesting.
Absolutely. You touched on Tibbins, you touched on Gresley, combined over 2,000 yards rushing between the two, and that's been the staple of any good Andy Abanco coach team at Kerwinsville, is their ability to run the football. And I think that's, in the end, if they're going to win this game, where they get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the running backs that they've had in the last decade at Kerwinsville. It's like a running back machine.
Yeah.
The one team that doesn't play this week, that'll play the winner of the Union ECC game, is Port Allegheny, and they're the top seed and well-deserved. They're the defending champion. Talk about an offense that explosive might not even begin to describe that offense. They put up over 50 points a game, despite the fact that most of their starters only play a half of the game. And it doesn't end, but it starts with senior quarterback Matt Bodemer, the all-time leading passer in Pennsylvania history. In his next game, he's going to become the first passer in Pennsylvania history to go over 10,000 career yards throwing the ball. He has the most touchdowns in Pennsylvania career history throwing. What is it now, Andy? 129? To 26 interceptions. The fact that when you have 103 more touchdown passes than interceptions, that's just amazing.
Mm-hmm. And it touches on the point I was going to bring up about Matt Bodemer. You can look at the stats, and the stats bear that out. This kid simply does not make mistakes throwing the football. He's quick, he's accurate, he's decisive. And of course, we talk about some of his receivers, Tice Miller and Nick Conway, who he's been working with for a while now. But a kid who you rarely see make a bad decision, and the numbers point that out.
Oh, and he has athletes out there. This isn't, I wouldn't necessarily, it's because, a lot of it might be because of the system and how well they run it, but there are tremendous athletes on that field. I watched Conway in track season. He's a state
medalist in both hurdle races.
Yeah,
big 6'2", just a big time athlete.
Right. So, I mean, they're athletes there, getting the job done in a good offense that they know how to run pretty well.
Well, and the one thing about Bodemer that I think kind of gets lost in the whole shuffle of him being such a great, prolific passer is how good of a runner he is. 2,007 career rushing yards and over almost 40 touchdowns on the ground. So it's not like you can just pin your ears back, go after him, and be okay, because he's got the ability to take off and beat you with his legs just as well as his arm.
He absolutely does. And against better competition, I think you've seen that with Matt Bodemer a little bit. His ability, his elusiveness, his ability to break contain. He's never, almost like an NFL version, smaller version of Ben Roethlisberger. You see, a play's never really over, just because his ability to escape the pocket, escape pressure, look downfield, and when nothing's there, take off and run with it. Underrated athlete in his own right.
Without the Ben Roethlisberger size, I know he's
sure.
not 6 foot at the most, but just a tremendous athlete. I agree.
When I look at the Class A bracket, I think everybody at the beginning of the season thought that the championship was going to come down to Clarion versus Port Allegheny again. Last year, that was a heck of a game, 35-34 Port. It was hanging in the balance until the end of that game. I could very well see the same type of scenario this year. Both of those football teams have been pointing towards that game. I don't see either of them maybe tripping up on the way to it. I think both of them could have interesting semifinal matchups. Brockville Kerwinsville doesn't make for necessarily an easy game for Clarion. Elk County Catholic is the last team in District 9 to beat Port Allegheny last year. So, and you wonder sometimes whether the way it's been, you look at the nor'easter that's hit over the eastern half of the state and in the eastern half of the country. If we get that kind of weather in a couple of weeks, you wonder how an offense like that, does that bring it back down to earth a little bit? Not saying they can't move the ball, because I think they can, but it changes what they want to do a little bit for sure.
I think that's the biggest factor that can work against Port Allegheny. Any other matchup in the final other than Clarion and Port Allegheny would be very shocking to me.
These two teams have been on a mission all season. It reflects in the way they've played. I think we talk about other teams like Kerwinsville, like Elk County Catholic Union, talented football teams, don't get me wrong, but these Port Allegheny and Clarion have been the class of District 9 Class A all season, and I think, along with you guys, I would be very surprised if those are the two teams that we don't see in the championship game.
All right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot right now. I'm going to take each of the 4 classifications, and I want you to tell me who's going to win the championship. We'll start with Quad A. Andy?
State College.
Rich?
State College.
Yeah, I got State College, so we're 3 for 3 there. Triple A, that regional playoffs.
I think Clearfield with their balance, with Lezer, I think they beat a good University Prep team in the finals there.
I'm going to go with Clearfield as well.
I'm going to change up here a little bit. I think University Prep, with what they've done against Perry in these couple of games, if they can emotionally get past losing to Perry in the City League Championship game, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I don't think Clearfield's played what I'd call a real difficult schedule this year. Not taking anything away from the Bison in their 10-0 record, but I think University Prep has played a little bit of a tougher schedule, so therefore I think University Prep might win that game. Double A.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. I know you guys probably like Carnegie. I like Kane. I think this has been a very underrated football team all year. A team that can get it done with defense, a team that can get it done with the offensive balance. I know Ed Conto and his track record in the playoffs, but I really feel this is a Kane team that can get the job done.
Well, he was talking about Kane the whole time, so I'm glad he did say Kane, but I'm going to go with Carn City.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Carn City too. I think the experience and the coaching are two really big keys there. Ed Conto, really good coach. I think close games, he's got the experience, whereas you have a first-year head coach at Kane who I think is a very good coach, but how does it react in a playoff situation? And then single A.
I mean, I got to go with Port Allegheny. This, a team that's been on a mission all season long, explosive offense. I think Clarion athletically is the one team in Class A that can match up with them, but it's too much offense.
Well, I'll go with the orange and black. I'll go with Clarion. I think, Chris, I told you back in week 1 or 2, I'm going Clarion over Port Allegheny in the finals. No reason to change.
All I'm going to say is a team in orange is going to win. If you really make me cut down to it, I think Port Allegheny. And I think Port Allegheny wins because I think that offensively they'll make fewer mistakes than Clarion. When Clarion's been in close games this year, it's because they've had a little bit of trouble with the turnovers. It hasn't happened often, but I could see a situation where a turnover comes up and hurts Clarion. Last year, it was a couple of fumbles that hurt the Bobcats and a missed extra point. I think with Antonio Treese, they don't miss very many extra points now. I think if it comes down to a field goal, it could go either way. Boy, that's a toss-up. 2 weeks from now, I might have a completely different thought process on that game than I do now.
Well, it's that hard.
Absolutely.
It's that hard.
Absolutely. And it's a game I think, obviously we're not sitting here and saying it's going to happen, but if it does happen, I think one that everyone's looking forward to. And I think the one thing we didn't really touch on is defensively. I think Port Allegheny has really taken a step up defensively this year. Kind of the question mark a little bit last year, but I think defensively they've shut teams down, which could be a difference.
Well, I guess my thought on that is play somebody before you tell me your defense is any good. And it's
Sure.
not their fault that
Sure.
they haven't played
Yeah,
anybody.
not at all.
But the AML, especially the AML North, was down even beyond where it usually is. You usually have a pretty good Countersport team in there or a pretty good Cameron County team. And I think this year you had one team that was just so much better than everybody else that it's hard to judge where Port Allegheny is defensively at this point. Clarion does have the top defense in District 9. What really is intriguing about that matchup, Port Allegheny obviously averages over 300 yards a game passing. Clarion allows 40 yards a game passing. Something's going to have to give.
Right.
It just depends on what side gives.
Well, I mean, what passing team is Clarion? I mean, that number is impressive. Has there been a passing team that they've shut down? Has anybody been able to throw the ball? There really wasn't a big passing team.
I think Punxsutawney tried to throw the football, same with
Okay.
AC Valley.
Okay.
But yeah, no.
For the year, neither one of those teams.
Neither one of those teams that you're looking at. In the AC Valley, it has to be said that Kevin Kaufman only played the second half of that game.
Okay.
That if he had played the full game, might have had a better feel. And that's one of the reasons why right now I lean towards Port Allegheny, because I've seen some chinks in the pass coverage potentially where guys have been open and guys have just, and quarterbacks have missed, where I don't think Matt Bodemer misses open receivers.
And you talk about, how do you defend that Port Allegheny offense? We've seen, obviously not a team of Clarion's caliber, but a lot of different schemes to try and defend them. Nothing's worked so far. You've seen press coverage. You've seen, I think Ottawa tried dropping back into 11-man pass.
They did. That's absurd when you think that.
And nothing's worked. So, what can Clarion devise? What can Larry Weiser and that coaching staff come up with that might slow down all those great athletes at Port?
You guys know from talking to me a lot that I think the only way you defend offenses like that, whether it's Port Allegheny, whether it's Brockway a couple years ago, you've got to put pressure on the quarterback. You've got to make him make decisions quicker than he wants to make those decisions, because no matter how good the quarterback, you see that everywhere from the NFL level to the college level, to the high school level, that when you take an offense like that and you get pressure on the quarterback, that can disrupt that offense. That's where Clarion, I think, does have the personnel defensively with guys like Destin Strauser and Ian Corbett, 2 sophomores up front who each have 7 sacks on the year, to maybe get after the quarterback a little bit and make it interesting. And I think that Port Allegheny will have to adjust to that like they did last year. And I think they made some in-game adjustments to some of that sort of stuff last year as well to make that a very interesting matchup. I'm really hoping, nothing against any of the other teams in District 9, and upsets are always a great story to report, but boy, I'm really looking forward to a chance to maybe see a couple of undefeated teams playing that title game. We haven't had that since 2000, where 2 undefeated teams have played for the A title. That year, Kerwin's will beat Clarion. We'd had it 2 years in a row. I think Cameron County was unbeaten the year before when they played Clarion.
That's right.
And Chris, you talk about putting pressure on Matt Bowden, or putting pressure on his receivers. Listen, those guys are going to get yards. It's just a byproduct of the offense. They're too good not to. But you're absolutely correct. I think you come up, not to put words in any coach's mouth here, but I think you have to press. I think you have to blitz. And yes, Bowden is going to escape. He's going to make plays outside the pocket. But can you disrupt that offense enough to force them into the mistakes that, quite frankly, they haven't made this year?
No question. Hey, that's our show for the night. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was our first go-around, so if we messed anything up, we apologize. If we mispronounced anybody's names, we apologize for that too. I want to thank Jake Bauer from exploreClarion. He really had this idea originally and came to me about it, and we were able to put this all together on pretty short notice. I'd like to thank Chris Dwork and Larry Wise, the head football coaches at Clarion and Brookville, for providing us with some of our props. We don't have any partial favorites towards Brookville and Clarion, folks. It was just, those were the 2 helmets we were able to get on very short notice.
We didn't pick Brookville. I don't think anybody picked them to win the title. We didn't pick Clarion.
Also like to thank Gary Wyant at Vinyl Graphics in Shippenville on Route 322 there. He made this great banner for us, the backdrop here. Gary does great work over there, so look him up if you ever have any needs for banners or anything like that, anything from your graduation stuff to anything. He does a great job, but till next time, this is Chris Rossetti saying goodbye with Andy Close and Rich Rhodes.